This daguerreotype was discovered in 2019, sealed inside a lead box buried beneath the foundations of Pennsylvania Hospital's demolished East Wing. The boy staring back at you is Marcus Blackwell, photographed 3 days before his 11th birthday in October 1883. But there's something fundamentally wrong with this image. Something that made the construction crew who found it refuse to handle it with bare hands. Look closely at his expression. That's not the face of a child. That's something else entirely, something ancient and knowing, trapped inside the body of a boy from Philadelphia's Rittenhouse Square. Marcus Blackwell's case represents one of the most thoroughly documented and least understood medical phenomena in American history. What happened to him over 18 months in 1882 and 1883 defies every conventional explanation. 3 distinguished physicians staked their reputations on studying him. 2 suffered complete nervous breakdowns. The third disappeared entirely, leaving behind only cryptic warnings in his journals that were sealed by court order until 2015. Philadelphia in 1882 was America's second-largest city, a bustling metropolis where gas lamps lined Chestnut Street and the newly completed City Hall Tower dominated the skyline. The Blackwell family lived in a respectable brownstone on Delancey Street, in the heart of Rittenhouse Square. Jonathan Blackwell was a successful maritime insurance broker. His wife Caroline was the daughter of a prominent Philadelphia surgeon. Marcus was their only surviving child, and by all accounts, he was completely ordinary. He attended the prestigious Philadelphia Academy, played cricket in the square, collected stamps, showed moderate aptitude in mathematics. His tutors described him as pleasant but unremarkable. There was absolutely nothing in Marcus's first 10 years to suggest what was coming. Then came the fever. It started on March 7, 1882. Marcus came home complaining of a headache and mild nausea. By evening, he had developed a fever of 102 degrees. Dr. Harrison Webb, the family physician, diagnosed a spring fever and prescribed bed rest. The fever broke after 5 days, exactly as predicted. Marcus seemed completely recovered. But when the fever broke, something else had awakened. The first sign appeared the morning after his fever subsided. Marcus came down to breakfast and spoke his first words of the day in flawless classical Greek. Not the halting schoolboy Greek he had been struggling with in lessons, but the fluid, colloquial Greek of ancient Athens. When his startled father asked him to repeat himself in English, Marcus blinked, confused, and asked what they meant. He had no memory of speaking Greek at all. Over the next week, Marcus demonstrated linguistic abilities that were simply impossible. He spoke spontaneously in languages he had never studied. Latin, French, German, Italian, and stranger still, languages his parents couldn't even identify. Dr. Webb witnessed Marcus writing fluent Hebrew and ancient Aramaic when handed paper and pen, all while claiming he couldn't remember learning to write at all. But the linguistic phenomenon was only the beginning. Marcus began displaying knowledge that no 10-year-old boy could possess. During dinner conversations, he would casually mention historical events with startling specificity. He described the siege of Constantinople in 1453 with details found only in obscure scholarly texts. He quoted extensively from philosophical works the family didn't own, works that weren't even available in English translation. Most disturbing of all, Marcus began revealing intimate knowledge about people he had never met. He told Caroline's sister about a secret love affair she had conducted 15 years earlier, details known only to her and a lover who had died in the Civil War. He confronted Jonathan's business partner with precise knowledge of embezzlement schemes. He knew things he couldn't know, things no one could know. Marcus's personality was changing in ways that went far beyond precocious intelligence. The gentle, somewhat timid boy was being replaced by something calculating and manipulative. He discovered people's deepest insecurities with surgical precision and exploited them ruthlessly. The household staff began refusing to be alone with him. 2 maids quit without explanation. The cook claimed Marcus had told her specific details about her father's death, details she had never shared with anyone, and that he described dying from consumption as if he had experienced it personally. When she confronted him, he simply smiled and said he knew what it felt like because he had died that way before, several times. Marcus also developed what Dr. Webb described as an unhealthy preoccupation with mortality and suffering. He drew elaborate sketches of anatomically correct dissections and plague victims. He described medieval surgical procedures with accuracy that shocked even Caroline's father, a veteran surgeon. He spoke casually about death as if it were a familiar companion. By June 1882, 3 months after the fever, the Blackwells were desperate. They had consulted every physician in Philadelphia. No one could explain Marcus's transformation. Dr. Webb finally recommended they consult Dr. Isaac Morrison at Pennsylvania Hospital. Morrison was one of America's leading neurologists, a man who had studied in Vienna with the pioneers of modern brain science. The decision to involve Dr. Morrison transformed Marcus from a private family tragedy into a medical case study that would haunt American psychiatry for generations. Dr. Isaac Morrison was 47 years old in 1882, at the peak of his career and reputation. He approached Marcus Blackwell's case with the confident rationality of a man who believed science could explain anything. This confidence would be completely shattered within weeks. Morrison's first examination of Marcus took place at the Blackwell home on June 15, 1882. His detailed notes from that session make disturbing reading. Morrison wrote that from the moment Marcus entered the study, he felt inexplicably uncomfortable, as if he were being evaluated rather than conducting an evaluation. Marcus answered questions with perfect courtesy, but there was something performative about his responses, as if he were deliberately playing the role of patient. When Morrison tested Marcus's cognitive abilities, he was astounded. The boy scored at levels equivalent to a university graduate in every area tested. His memory was essentially perfect, his reasoning abilities extraordinary, his knowledge base impossibly broad. But it was the nature of that knowledge that disturbed Morrison most. Marcus didn't just know facts. He understood complex relationships between historical events, could analyze philosophical arguments with graduate-level sophistication, and demonstrated intimate familiarity with subjects requiring years of specialized study. During their second session, Marcus did something that fundamentally changed Morrison's approach to the case. The doctor had been questioning him about his symptoms when Marcus suddenly interrupted and said, "Dr. Morrison, would you like me to tell you about the girl who drowned?" Morrison, confused, asked what he meant. Marcus proceeded to describe, in precise detail, a childhood incident Morrison had never shared with anyone. When Morrison was 12 years old, he had been swimming in the Schuylkill River with a neighborhood girl named Elizabeth. She had gotten caught in the current and drowned while Morrison watched, frozen in terror and unable to help. The guilt had haunted him his entire life. Marcus described Elizabeth's final moments with impossible accuracy. The way the water had looked as it pulled her under. The expression on her face when she realized she was going to die. Even the specific words she had tried to scream before the water filled her mouth. Then Marcus looked directly at Morrison and said something that made the doctor's blood run cold. "She doesn't blame you, you know. She understood you were just a frightened child. But you've never forgiven yourself, have you?" Morrison left the Blackwell home that day deeply shaken. He had no idea how Marcus could have known about Elizabeth. There were no records, no witnesses still living, no possible source for that information. That night, Morrison made the decision to admit Marcus to Pennsylvania Hospital for comprehensive study. He needed to understand what was happening to this boy, not just for the Blackwells, but for medical science itself. Marcus was admitted to Pennsylvania Hospital on July 3, 1882. He was placed in a private room in the hospital's psychiatric wing, a section that had recently been renovated with the latest thinking in mental health treatment. Morrison assembled a team of specialists to study Marcus, including Dr. William Foster, an expert in brain anatomy, and Dr. Margaret Sinclair, one of the few female physicians in America and a specialist in childhood development. The first week of observation revealed patterns that defied medical explanation. Marcus demonstrated physical capabilities that shouldn't have been possible for a child of his size and build. During a fit of anger when a nurse tried to restrict his movements, he bent a solid iron bed frame with his bare hands. Dr. Foster examined the bent metal and estimated it would require the strength of a full-grown laborer to achieve such deformation. Marcus also showed abnormal resistance to physical discomfort. He could maintain uncomfortable positions for hours without fatigue. Once, a night orderly found him standing motionless in the center of his room at 3 a.m., staring at the wall. When questioned, Marcus said he had been standing there since dinner, more than 7 hours, without moving once. The temperature in Marcus's room remained consistently lower than the rest of the hospital, a difference of 5 to 7 degrees that persisted regardless of heating efforts. Plants placed near his window withered and died within days. Medical staff began reporting severe headaches and nausea after spending extended time in his presence. But the most disturbing aspect of Marcus's hospitalization was his effect on other patients. Within 2 weeks of his arrival, 3 patients on the same floor began demonstrating bizarre symptoms. They stopped sleeping, claiming they could hear voices whispering in languages they didn't understand. They drew identical symbols on their walls, complex geometric patterns none of them had seen before. When questioned separately, all 3 described the same recurring nightmare about a child with ancient eyes standing at the foot of their beds, watching them with inhuman patience. Dr. Morrison decided to conduct a comprehensive neurological examination using the most advanced techniques available. He brought in specialized equipment from Johns Hopkins University and assembled a team of observers to document every aspect of the examination. What happened during this procedure would become one of the most controversial moments in the case. As Morrison prepared to examine Marcus's reflexes and responses, the boy looked directly at him and said, "You're going to try to photograph me soon, aren't you, doctor?" Morrison was startled. The photography session had been planned, but not yet announced to anyone outside the medical team. Marcus smiled that cold smile that had become his trademark. "You want to see if the camera captures what people feel when they look at me. You want to know if the machine can see what I've become." The photography session was scheduled for October 18, 1883, after more than a year of observation. Morrison hired Samuel Fletcher, a renowned medical photographer who had documented hundreds of psychiatric cases. Fletcher arrived at Pennsylvania Hospital that morning with his equipment, expecting a routine session. He had photographed disturbed patients before, violent cases, catatonic cases, patients in the grip of severe delusions. He thought he was prepared for anything. The session took place in Marcus's room at 10 a.m. As Fletcher set up his camera, he noticed the unusual cold in the room despite it being a mild autumn day. Marcus sat in a wooden chair, wearing the simple gray uniform of hospital patients, and watched Fletcher work with unsettling intensity. When Fletcher finally positioned his camera and prepared to take the exposure, something happened that he would later describe as the most terrifying moment of his career. The instant Marcus looked directly into the camera lens, the room temperature dropped so dramatically that Fletcher's breath became visible. The exposure required 15 seconds, and during that entire time, Fletcher felt as if something was looking back at him through the camera, something far older and more powerful than the 11-year-old boy sitting in the chair. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the photographic plate. When Fletcher developed the image in his portable darkroom, both he and Dr. Morrison stood in silence for several minutes. The photograph showed Marcus exactly as he had appeared during the session, but there was something in the image that was deeply wrong. His eyes seemed to have impossible depth, as if the camera had captured layers of consciousness that shouldn't exist. The shadows in the room appeared in places they hadn't been during the actual session. And if you looked at the photograph long enough, you began to feel that Marcus's eyes were following you, tracking your movement regardless of the viewing angle. Fletcher refused to take any additional photographs. He packed his equipment and left Pennsylvania Hospital within an hour, and according to hospital records, he never worked as a medical photographer again. The single photograph he produced became one of the most studied and debated medical images in American history. After the photography session, Marcus's condition deteriorated rapidly. He began experiencing prolonged episodes of what Morrison called cataleptic states. During these episodes, which lasted hours or sometimes days, Marcus remained completely motionless and unresponsive. His eyes stayed open, tracking movement around the room, but he didn't speak or react to any stimulus. His breathing and heartbeat slowed to barely detectable levels. During these cataleptic states, the supernatural phenomena around Marcus intensified dramatically. Objects in his room moved without physical contact. The temperature dropped to near freezing levels even in summer. Staff members reported hearing whispered conversations in his room when he was alone and supposedly unconscious. One nurse claimed she saw shadowy figures moving through the walls of Marcus's room, shapes that resembled people but moved in ways that defied natural physics. Dr. Morrison's health began to deteriorate as well. The strain of studying Marcus's case, combined with the inexplicable phenomena he was witnessing, took a severe toll. He developed chronic insomnia, severe migraines, and what he described in his private journals as a persistent feeling of being watched by something malevolent. His colleagues noticed his personality changing. The confident, rational scientist was being replaced by a paranoid, obsessive man who filled notebooks with increasingly incoherent theories about the nature of consciousness and reality. Dr. Foster, Morrison's colleague, suffered a complete mental breakdown in December 1883. He was found in Marcus's room at 2 a.m., screaming incoherently about doors that shouldn't be opened and things that were trying to come through. He spent the rest of his life in an institution, never fully recovering his sanity. Dr. Sinclair requested immediate transfer to another hospital, writing in her resignation letter that continuing to study Marcus represented a danger to her mental and physical health. Marcus Blackwell died on January 17, 1884, at 11 years old. The circumstances of his death were as mysterious as his life. Morrison found him in his room early that morning, lying peacefully in bed with his eyes closed. There had been no signs of distress, no indication anything was wrong. An autopsy revealed no cause of death. His organs were in perfect condition. His brain showed no abnormalities beyond unusual neural development patterns that the examining physicians couldn't explain. At the exact moment of Marcus's death, three strange things happened. The temperature in his room, which had been abnormally cold for 18 months, suddenly rose to normal levels. Every plant that had withered in his presence began growing again overnight. And several patients who had developed psychological symptoms after exposure to Marcus spontaneously recovered, waking from their disturbed states with no memory of the preceding months. Dr. Morrison never recovered from the case. He published one brief, heavily edited monograph about Marcus in 1885, omitting most of the supernatural elements and focusing on the neurological aspects. But his private journals, discovered after his death, told a very different story. Morrison had become convinced that Marcus's fever hadn't caused his transformation but had opened something, a doorway through which something else had entered. He wrote extensively about his theory that consciousness might exist independently of physical bodies, that what had inhabited Marcus was something that had existed for centuries, moving from host to host, accumulating knowledge and experience across lifetimes. In 1888, Morrison disappeared while traveling in Europe. He was last seen boarding a train in Vienna, heading for an undisclosed destination in the Austrian Alps. He was never found. The few letters he sent to colleagues before vanishing contained increasingly disturbing theories about the nature of human consciousness and warnings about studying cases like Marcus too closely. Marcus's photograph remained at Pennsylvania Hospital until the building's demolition in 2019. It was kept in a sealed archive, rarely shown even to researchers. Those who did examine it reported feeling profound unease, persistent nightmares, and a sensation of being observed. The photograph is now housed in the College of Physicians of Philadelphia's Mutter Museum, in a climate-controlled vault with restricted access. Modern neurologists and psychiatrists who have studied Morrison's surviving case files offer various theories. Some suggest Marcus suffered from an extreme variant of savant syndrome combined with temporal lobe epilepsy, which could theoretically explain his expanded knowledge and unusual perceptions. Others propose he experienced a severe dissociative disorder where multiple personalities, each with access to different cognitive abilities, emerged after the fever. But none of these theories fully explain the physical phenomena documented by multiple credible witnesses. The temperature fluctuations, the bent metal, the effects on other patients, the photograph itself. These elements resist conventional scientific explanation even with our modern understanding. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Marcus Blackwell's case is what it suggests about the limits of human experience and the possibilities that exist beyond our current scientific frameworks. Dr. Morrison's final journal entry, written 3 days before his disappearance, reads, "I have come to believe that what we call consciousness is merely the visible portion of something far larger and stranger than we can imagine." Marcus was not possessed by something external. Rather, he became briefly transparent to something that exists in all of us, hidden beneath layers of ordinary awareness. The fever didn't bring something in. It removed the barriers that keep something out. And now I fear I understand too much to ever find peace again. When you look at Marcus Blackwell's photograph today, you're looking at a moment captured in 1883 when something ancient and inexplicable briefly became visible through the eyes of a child. Whatever the truth about his condition, whether neurological anomaly or something beyond current scientific understanding, Marcus's case reminds us that human experience contains depths we have barely begun to explore. And sometimes, perhaps, there are mysteries that are more important than their solutions, questions that should remain unanswered, and doors that should stay closed.